This is episode 28 of the Relentless Man podcast. Tao Te Ching, part 3. Hi, and welcome to the Relentless Man podcast. I'm your host, Christian Mujaiso, and my goal is to help men die empty, to make sure that you die having used up every ounce of potential that is trapped within you. However, to help you die empty, I'll have to be very raw and brutally honest with you. So if you're easily offended, stop listening. If you're easily triggered, stop listening. If you can't handle explicit language, stop listening. If you are fragile, stop listening. Otherwise, let's dig in. Before we begin this episode, I'd like to urge you not to blindly copy or implement anything that I say in this podcast episode, or in this podcast for that matter. Rather, what I recommend is that you turn on your brain, that you think for yourself, and that you make sure that the decisions and actions that you take are the product of your own thinking and decision-making process. Remember, do not be a follower, be a student. In this episode, this is part 3 of our series in the Tao Te Ching. We're going to continue talking about the Tao Te Ching. So we're in the 3rd verse now. We're going to continue with that. So naturally, you might be asking yourself, Christian, I'm an ambitious guy. I am a relentless man. I want to realize my true potential. Why do I need to be listening to this stuff about the Tao Te Ching and all this spiritual stuff? Well, the fact is that, okay, let's suppose that maybe you haven't bought into the spiritual part of it yet. Eventually you will. That will be because part of you is spirit. But let's suppose you haven't bought into that either. Well, one value in learning about the Tao Te Ching is that the principles in the Tao Te Ching apply to the real world. They're the sorts of things that will enable you to live better and realize your potential. That is, if you just looked at it on the surface level in terms of tactics to implement, it's vastly useful. In fact, if you studied all the principles in the Tao Te Ching and applied them correctly, well, you basically have mastered life. So that's how deep this thing is. But it goes much further than that, because as I was mentioning in the previous episode, when we talk about dying empty, we talk about maximizing and realizing your true potential. But you have a lot of potential. You have physical potential, you have psychological potential, you have social potential, you also have spiritual potential. And your spiritual potential is the most important, because out of it, if you're really in line spiritually, then everything else is able to flow, right? So here by spiritual, I don't mean like maybe what you learned in church or whatever. It's more, I guess, what I refer to here as being spiritual is first of all discovering who you are, answering the question, who am I? Because the fact that I'm bringing that up means that, for instance, I am not Christian Mujaiso. Christian Mujaiso is my name, but that's not who I am. So whatever your name is, that's not who you are. Who are you really? That's an important question to ask. When you discover the answer to this question, you'll be able to truly realize your potential. In fact, if you never answer the question, who am I? Well, there's a limit to how far you'll go, and you'll never really be able to die empty. And the other thing about answering the question, who am I, is that nobody can answer it for you. I know who I am, but actually I cannot describe in words who I am. That's kind of the weird thing about it. And you as well, if you continue on this process of dying empty, if you just try to push yourself to the limit let's say you're trying to be a swimmer and you decide to push yourself to the limit as a swimmer. Maybe you decide to push yourself in terms of how you swim. Then you'll discover maybe you have a coach and you have to learn how to take feedback. So you try to make yourself as good as you possibly can be at taking feedback. Then you'll realize that your emotions are messing with your swimming, and you try to really do the best you can to control your emotions. If you continue that process of realizing your potential in everything that's relevant towards you accomplishing your goal in life, the end result at some point, if you really follow this process diligently and you don't refuse to answer certain questions, or if you're not afraid of asking certain questions, eventually you'll realize on a visceral level who you are. The first time I realized who I was scared. It was a very scary experience. And I had a lot of doubt. I couldn't believe that's really who I am, but I discovered it is. And you as well, the process of being relentless. We've looked at being relentless and dying empty from so many perspectives. One perspective we've said is that dying empty is using up all of your potential. Another perspective we looked at was that dying empty is about breaking the rules and working in accordance with the laws. If you break as many rules as possible that are holding you back and you follow the laws, then we can also say you're dying empty. Another way to reframe dying empty is becoming yourself. When you truly become yourself, you're also said to have died empty. And these are all equivalent ways, different ways of looking at the same idea, but dying empty could be viewed from different angles. But it's really true. If discovering who you are is also dying empty. Because if you discover who you are, indeed, you have to also realize your true potential in the process. If you try to realize your true potential and really push, you also discover who you are. So it's all connected. And if you're really discovering who you are, then one thing you're going to have to do is break all the rules that have been holding you back. So the definitions are related. And as we continue, we're going to have more and more equivalent ways of looking at what dying empty is. All right, going on too long on that topic. So let's actually dig into the Tao Te Ching. So as I was saying, it was written by a smart Chinese guy called Lao Tzu. He was an enlightened master, and he wrote this book roughly 5,000 years ago. But you read it today and it's perfectly fresh. There's nothing irrelevant about it. So there's a timeless quality to this text. Okay, so we almost finished part 2, the second verse of the Tao Te Ching, but we had a small part left. So let me read the last stanza and then we continue here. Therefore, the master acts without doing anything and teaches without saying anything. Things arise and she lets them come. Things disappear and she lets them go. She has but doesn't possess. Acts but doesn't expect. So that's where we stopped last time. Now we're continuing. When her work is done, she forgets it. That is why it lasts forever. So what does that phrase mean? When her work is done, she forgets it. Here, the feminine gender is being used to refer to the master. That is, the person who's realizing their true potential. Someone who's living to the fullest. You could think of that as a relentless man. So here is saying that when her work is done, she forgets it. Well, what does this mean? Well, usually most people, or at least it's a very common practice. I can't say most people because I don't know most people, but it's a common practice that when let's say you do an amazing job, we tend to like to dwell on it. For instance, maybe back in the day when you were in school, you studied really hard and did well on a test. You got like a 90-something on the test. And then you were super proud of yourself. And then for the next week or month, you kept reminding people of how well you did on that test and thinking all the time, going back mentally to how well you did on that test. Well, what Lao Tzu is saying is that once you do that, then you're not really a master anymore. You're not really a relentless man, because a relentless man, once he does something, he forgets it. Why is this an important principle? Because once you do something, it's no longer your potential. Since you're trying to realize your true potential, by definition, it means you're trying to do things that are better than what you did before. You're trying to do things that you've never been able to do before. So if, let's say, you run a race in 10 minutes, right? Once you've finished running the race in 10 minutes, you maybe celebrate for half a second. But for a relentless man, now you think about what's next. Well, the next thing is maybe run the same race in 9 minutes. Then maybe 8, then maybe 7, always pushing to the limit. That's what dying empty is all about. And so in particular, and it's often said that the greatest obstacle, your greatest obstacle is your last success. Once you succeed, once you do something well, we have a tendency to dwell on it and live there. Once you live there, you're living in the past and you've stopped realizing your true potential. Realizing your true potential is all about recognizing at every point that anything that you do, you can always do it better. In fact, I was listening to, I was watching a video, and there was Elon Musk, and Elon Musk was being asked about whether he's the founder of SpaceX and Tesla. So, I think pretty much everybody knows him. Most people do know him. And he was they were asking, I think a journalist was asking about when he drives in his Tesla, does he ever sit in it and think, wow, this is such a beautiful car? And he hesitated. He said, no, that's not true. I'm going to paraphrase him. But he said something to the effect of the way he views his car. He's always looking at the car in terms of what's wrong with it, in terms of the imperfections, because it's his duty to make an even better car than the car that is currently there. And that's how a relentless man thinks. Like, for instance, I make this podcast, but once I make the podcast episode, I forget about it. After I've submitted it and it's been released, I also listen to it like one of the listeners, like you. And when I'm listening to it, I'm not listening to it to think of how awesome I am. Absolutely not. I'm listening to the episode, in particular looking for mistakes, inaccuracies, things to improve. I always looked at my work in terms of mistakes, because the mistakes enable me to do an even better job, which makes me more relentless, which helps me to die empty, which makes it possible for me to explain, to help give you the ideas in order for you to die empty. So that's a reframing of how to look at things. Once something is done, you forget about it. If you construct a building, then don't focus on the building you constructed. Now think about constructing a taller building, a fatter building, a more modern building, or something that is not even a building, maybe something that lives in the sky or something. But a relentless man is always pushing the boundaries. He's never satisfied with where he is. He's always trying to do more, trying to push harder. That's why when he does his work, he forgets it. And here Lao Tzu says, when her work is done, she forgets it. That is why it lasts forever. So what's this part about lasting forever? Lao Tzu is saying, okay, so the master does her work, and then once it's done, she doesn't dwell on it. She forgets it. And because she forgets her work lasts forever. Well, what does that mean? How can forgetting and not focusing on your previous success make that success last forever? This is kind of a paradox. So what could it possibly mean? Well, I guess the idea that Lao Tzu is trying to give us here is that if you really adopt this attitude of always, when you do something, no matter how, even if people tell you this is awesome, this is amazing, you forget about it. You focus on the next thing. If you keep doing this, the end result is that, that means that every project you do is very likely going to be better than the one before. Eventually, you reach a point where you'll perform a piece of work that you look at obviously in terms of its mistakes, but other people will look at it in complete amazement, and it will become one of those works that is always cited and always remembered. Good examples are like, let's say Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. He wrote the speech, so it's very likely that he probably thought of the speech in terms of its inaccuracies. See, I think he was a really relentless guy, so very likely he was thinking about it as, how can I do better? How can I become a better leader? So when he made that speech, he was probably focusing on the next speech, the next step in the progress of the liberation movement. But you see, that attitude cultivated over time is what made it possible for him to create a speech that's basically immortal. The Martin Luther King speech is listened to and talked about all the time. And I don't know if we'll reach a point in the future where the Martin Luther King speech will be forgotten. It's very likely going to last forever. All because we had an individual who was always pushing his limit, pushing the limits of his moral character, pushing the limits of what he can do, pushing the limits of his ability to speak. And the end result of all of this was that because he kept forgetting his previous success and trying to make a better success, the end result was that his work ended up lasting forever. And this is kind of part of what this means. But if you have a better interpretation, please let me know. I'm always open to learn. So let's move on to the third verse. That's only the second verse. Can you believe this? Let's move on to the third verse of the Tao Te Ching. It says, if you overesteem great men, people become powerless. If you overvalue possessions, people begin to steal. What does this mean, that if you overesteem great men, people become powerless? So usually in our society, we have certain heroes and legends, people like Albert Einstein. They're people we've elevated to an extremely high level. Abraham Lincoln, right? Brilliant president. Basically, if you hear people who are fascinated by him talk about him, you feel like they're not talking about a human anymore. They're talking about a god or something, right? Because they've really elevated the human. They've elevated Albert Einstein to a mythical status. People like Abraham Lincoln have been elevated to a mythical status. And there are many leaders today, Steve Jobs, etc. Now, what's the effect of this? Once you take someone who's actually human and you think of them as being superhuman, the end result is that you feel like you cannot accomplish the things that they accomplished because they're not human. You're merely human. you look at yourself and you're like, okay, it takes me a long time to solve problems. I'm only human, but look at this brilliant physicist who figured out the relationship between space and time and wrote down the equations of energy and mass and revolutionized physics. That guy is not, I'm not that guy. I mean, I struggle with problems. That guy is like a super genius. I'll never be at his level. Once you do that, you give yourself an excuse to not push. In particular, you begin to think that what a guy like Albert Einstein accomplished is not within your reach. And this is actually a rule. It's not a law. It's a human being. If a human being was able to do something, it means that you can also do it. If a human being is able to understand complex ideas, it means you can also understand complex ideas. Why? Because you're both human. And the person who accomplishes amazing things is following certain laws. You learn the laws they're following, and you'll be able to accomplish the things of similar magnitude or even greater magnitude than what they can accomplish. So what am I saying here? This is probably something people don't want to hear, but think of any amazing legend that you really admire. Anyone. You're equal to those people. As human beings, we're equal in that sense. You're equal to Albert Einstein. You're equal to Abraham Lincoln. You're equal to Martin Luther King. You're equal to Nelson Mandela. You're equal to Musk. Any great person you can imagine, you're equal to them. And in fact, try your best not to elevate people too much and think of them as gods or superhuman. Because once you do that, you begin to think that you're not on the same footing, and yet you are. I'm not saying that at the moment you know as much as they do, because that's very likely not true. But it means that if you learn the laws that they learned and you work in accordance with them, you'll be able to accomplish things that they were able to accomplish. Because there were people too. They started out not knowing, just like you don't know. And they pushed and they accomplished something, which means that if you start out too and you push, you'll also accomplish something. Right. So this is what Lao Tzu here is talking about. If you overesteem great men, people become powerless. If you overvalue possessions, people begin to steal. I think this makes sense. It's once you give something meaning and great value, that's when people want to have it. So, for instance, I guess a good example, I don't know if it's true, but it's a good illustration. So, there was a time, I think, back in Africa, there are parts of Africa that have a lot of diamond. In the south part and in West Africa, there's a lot of diamond over there. And before colonization, the African communities didn't view like diamond as a very valuable commodity. They viewed it more as, just an interesting stone. Like you get a diamond, it's a really interesting stone that's very clear and hard. But it was not something that was valuable to the African community. Africans didn't trade at that time in terms of, at least as far as I know, didn't trade in terms of stones and didn't trade in terms of diamond. There were other things that were more valuable, like ivory, maybe, etc. And other forms of barter trade at the time. But then when colonization happened and Europeans went to Africa, the end result was that they'd see these diamonds, and of course for them diamonds were really, really important stuff, right? Because we know the value of diamonds. For the Europeans, diamonds were really important. For the Africans at the time, diamonds held no value. And as a result, you'd find there are stories of finding kids playing with diamonds, just throwing them around, leaving them anywhere, because no one had given them value. So the kids and the people in Africa at the time didn't know that this object was not presented to them as valuable. Diamond was just an ordinary stone that was clear. But once the Europeans showed up and said, no, diamond is so important, it's worth millions of dollars, etc., suddenly diamond became important. And now people suddenly began to kill themselves in order to obtain diamond. And I think that's what Lao Tzu is talking about here, is that when you overvalue possessions, right? If you give possessions value, especially if you make them very valuable, then suddenly people begin to steal. But it's hard to find someone, let's say, stealing a piece of paper. Why don't we steal pieces of paper? Part of the reason is that pieces of paper, sure, they're valuable, but we haven't made them super valuable to the point where having a piece of paper demonstrates your status in society. So if you have a paper, you're more valuable than others. We haven't reached that point yet. And as a result, that's part of why people don't steal pieces of paper. But once you give those things great value, once you make, let's say, a special type of paper so important, right, then people begin to steal and cheat to get it. And actually, we do have pieces of paper like that. We have certain certificates from, let's say, I'm sure like a diploma from Harvard University. That's really big, right? So we've given value to that diploma. And so suddenly people will do whatever it takes, will commit fraud and lie and cheat and pretend to have gotten a diploma from Harvard because we've given it value. If we hadn't given it value, no one would really, few people would be like trying to steal or lie that, oh yeah, I went to Harvard University, for instance. That's kind of the idea he's bringing here. And then the next stanza of the third verse says, the master leads by emptying people's minds and filling their cores. So what does that mean? The master leads by emptying people's minds. What does it mean to empty someone's mind? So usually the mind is interpreted, I think Lao Tzu here is interpreting the mind as the part of you that thinks, the thinker. So usually, as I was mentioning before, most of the problems you have are as a result of your thinking. In particular, when you're afraid, either you're looking into the past or the future. Maybe you're looking, if you're afraid, you're looking into the future. So let's say a lion is running towards you. Oh, okay, we don't have lions. We do have lions, but it's not like, fine, let's work with a lion. A lion is running towards you and you're super afraid of the lion. Okay? So why are you afraid of the lion? Before the lion has even come close to you, it's just approaching you. It's because you've projected, you've thought about what your future is going to be like. Right? You maybe envisioned yourself being beaten and eaten up by the lion. That thought of the future is what scares you. Right? So your fear comes from your thinking of the future. And think about pain, depression. Right? So maybe something was done to you as a kid. And what causes you depression? Well, you keep thinking about that event. You're thinking about the past. So your mind, in this case, your thinking is what's causing your pain. In fact, there's very little pain that's really real. So if I cut off your finger, okay, that's real legitimate pain that's happening now. But most of the pain we experience, most of the suffering we have is usually inflicted by our thinking. Either think of the future, a horrible future, or uncertain future scares us, causes us anxiety and pain, or a horrible past also usually tends to scare us away. And so obviously that's why many of the teachings, like the Buddhist teachings and many Eastern teachings teach us not to, if you want to be happy and enjoy your life, one of the key ways to do it is to control your mind, to live in the present moment. Because when you're in the present moment, you're not thinking about the future. So you can't really be afraid if you're not thinking about the future. You also not think about the past, so it's hard to be depressed, which leaves you in the now, and in the now you can be happy. So usually that's how it's said. And here it's saying that, look, the master leads by emptying people's minds. What does that mean? So to empty someone's mind is to get rid of the thoughts in one's mind. So for instance, if right now you just stayed calm and had no thought in your mind, would say your mind is empty. You've emptied your mind. And so now we're saying that the master leads people by emptying their minds. Well, as I was mentioning before, a relentless man, if you're going to be a relentless man, well, very likely you're going to have a craft. You're going to have to master something. So you could think of a relentless man as a master. So you could interpret it as, look, a master or a relentless man leads by emptying people's minds. What that means is that a master does really remarkable work. For instance, that's one way. You do really remarkable work that it fills people with astonishment. For instance, imagine a magician. Right? A magician, if he's a really good magician, he does something that's so remarkable that the audience, for the time being, when they observe what he did, maybe he made a rabbit disappear. The audience is so mesmerized that for the moment they're just in awe. And when people are in awe, they're not thinking. I don't know if you've ever observed that. Think about anytime just observe yourself when you're in awe or when you're in shock about something. You're not thinking at all. You're completely present. And that's what he's talking about. If you're a master, then it means that you do really remarkable work. And when work is really remarkable, it makes people stop in awe and wonder and confusion. And this makes them completely present, which means that it makes their minds empty. And that's what he's saying here, that a master leads people by emptying people's minds. A master leads by emptying people's minds. You do work that's so remarkable that people are in shock. in awe. Their minds are empty and they're present. And we mentioned before, if you're completely present, then that's where happiness comes from. Okay. And then it says, look, the master leads people by emptying people's minds and filling their cores. So core here is translated as, I was looking at translation, in some places it means stomach. I understand emptying people's minds, but I don't understand what it has to do with filling their core, filling people's bellies. I don't get that part. If anyone knows what this means, this part of it means, please let me know. Emptying their minds, I get that, but filling their cores, I don't know. Please explain to me that if anybody knows the answer to this. Okay, and then, so let's continue. The master leads by emptying people's minds and filling their cores, by weakening their ambition and toughening their resolve. So what is he talking here about weakening ambition? Because, this podcast is all about, a relentless man is ambitious. He wants to accomplish things that he hasn't accomplished yet. So I guess what Lao Tzu here is talking about weakening ambition is talking about how ambition is not all good. Because usually what happens is if someone is ambitious, usually what happens is you have someone has like a goal in the future. Let's say I want to dance in front of the world. Let's say that's your goal. That's your main ambition. You want to dance and you want the whole world to see you. Well, usually that ambition could lead you to be so fixated on dancing in front of the world that you don't enjoy anything anymore. Every day, all the practice sessions, instead of enjoying them, instead of being in the moment, instead of doing your best on the practice sessions, you're so caught up in the desire. You're so caught up on being in front of the world stage. And although you may not realize it, part of it might be because you think that when you dance on the world stage, when you reach your goal, then you'll be truly happy. Of course, this is a delusion. When you reach your goal, you'll be happy for a few seconds, and then you'll be unhappy again. And then maybe you'll set another goal and be unhappy again. So here's talking about when you weaken your ambition. I think what is referring to here is that weakening your ambition is, not having ambition. Ambition is good. Ambition is useful. But your ambition, you have to be able to enjoy the moment as well. To focus on doing your best work every single moment. That is, you have the goal in mind, you have the ambition in mind, but the ambition is not strong. It's weakened in the sense that you're able to, for a while, detach from the overall goal and take the steps you need to take in order to get there. So like if you're taking a journey and you're so focused on, let's say, arriving at your destination, maybe you have a lot of ambition to arrive at your destination, then you never really enjoy the steps. You don't look at the flowers on the way, etc. And you need to do that because the final result, the goal, is the outcome, is the product of how well you did in all the moments that came before the goal. So it's important to have goals. It's important to be ambitious as a relentless man, but it's important to not be too ambitious in the sense that, I'm not saying set very big goals, but what I mean by being too ambitious here is that you become so fixated on your goal that you forget to live in the moment. You forget to give your best at every practice session because you expect that the future event achieving the goal will make you happy. And of course, you'll realize it never will. It never does. All right. That's what he means by weakening their ambition and toughening their resolve. So what does he mean by toughening their resolve? I'm not so sure. Unless maybe resolve means like you're resolved in the present moment, but I'm confused about that. This is like one of my hardest verses. I don't get it very much. And then the next part of it says, he helps people lose everything they know, everything they desire, and creates confusion in those who think that they know. This is a really important part of it. So you were born in a community. What's Lao Tzu saying here? You were born in a community. And in particular, you probably didn't decide to be a relentless man at birth. You probably lived for a while and then at a certain age, maybe it's just recent, you decided, I want to realize all my potential, I want to die empty. Well, the thing is that in your past, there were a lot of things you were taught. Your parents taught you certain ideas, your society taught you certain ideas, so your brain is filled with beliefs. In fact, every action that you take is a result of your belief system. Now, very likely, your belief system is not something you constructed by yourself. There are many beliefs that were given to you that you never even thought about for yourself. Maybe someone told you that you're slow. you never examined that belief. You didn't think about it. You just accepted it because it's what you were taught. But you see, what Lao Tzu here is saying is that a master, a relentless man, he helps people lose everything they know. That is, it's important to doubt. The thing he's talking about here is doubt. That is, every belief that you have in your mind, there should be some doubt about it, right? Should never be so certain of anything, is what he's saying. So, your parents told you that you're a slow thinker. Well, you don't have to believe it completely. You can doubt that statement and actually put it to the test and ask yourself, well, if I worked really hard and I thought really hard and read books about speed, is it really true that I can't think any faster? And in the case of this belief, you realize it's actually bullshit. You can work much faster than you're working now. So this whole idea of that you're slow is really not true. It's a rule. It's not a law. And this you're able to discover and break the rules and get rid of all these beliefs that are not moving you towards your goals. The way you're able to do that is if you're able to lose everything that you know. That is, if you're willing to get rid of beliefs that are holding you back or that are not serving you. But to do that, you have to doubt everything that you know. And that's important. It's a scary thing to doubt things that you always thought were true. But a relentless man is someone who feels fear, but acts in spite of it. And so while it might be scary to lose everything you know, to doubt everything you believe, it is necessary. And without it, again, you're not going to be able to die empty and realize your true potential. Realizing your true potential and dying empty is a scary journey. I'm not going to lie to you. I feel the fear every single day, but it's important to be able to act in spite of that fear. And so Lao Tzu is saying, okay, the master, the relentless man, helps people lose everything they know, everything they desire. So what does that mean to lose everything that you desire? So as you mentioned before, usually if you desire an outcome, then usually what happens is that you're so focused on the outcome that you don't enjoy or take the moments before it very seriously. And yet it's the moments that come before that make the given outcome. And usually sometimes our desires are hidden in a lot of misconceptions. What's an example of this? So, for instance, let's say you really want a steak. You have a strong desire to eat a steak. So, it could be that we can ask the question, why do you really want to eat the steak? And if you kept asking this question, you might find some answers that you might not want to hear about. The answer may very well be that you think that eating the steak will make you happy. But of course, you'll be disappointed because you realize that you'll eat the steak, and then a few minutes later, you'll still be depressed and unhappy. So in this particular case, your desire for the steak is actually not serving you. You're trying to be happy. You're trying to be happy in every moment. You're trying to enjoy your life and live to the fullest. But now there's something that's holding you back because you think that this steak is going to make you happy when in fact it's not. You're looking in the wrong place. So here what they're talking about is the master, part of dying empty, part of realizing your potential is about questioning your desires and losing some of them. Because once you realize that a steak is not going to make you happy, well, then you might lose, at least your desire for it will not be as strong as before. Because you realize, okay, why am I craving this steak? It's because I think it will make me happy. And you realize, no, it's not going to make me happy. So you lose that desire and you maybe focus on other desires. Right? So what else? Okay, you want to be a relentless man. You have this big vision in life. Let's say, you want to become a billionaire. Maybe that's your desire. Now we ask the question, why do you want to become a billionaire? And you'll discover it might be a very shocking answer that the reason you want to become a billionaire is because it will make you feel good about yourself. But obviously that's bullshit. It's really not going to make you feel good about yourself. So part of becoming enlightened, part of awakening, part of dying empty is going to be you abandoning that desire, realizing that, okay, the desire of being a billionaire is actually unfounded. It doesn't move me towards my goals. A better desire might be to serve people or to look within and realize that, look, to feel good about yourself, you don't need external things to make you feel good about yourself. You can feel good about yourself any moment. You can find happiness in every moment. You can be happy. You don't need to find happiness. Money is not going to make you happy. Success is not going to make you happy. Titles are not going to make you happy. And so all these desires, what the master does is he loses them. And as you continue on your relentless journey, people are going to come to you for guidance. And they're going to have some of these misguided desires. You're going to maybe find someone like, in my case, I sometimes tutor math, and I have students who come to me and they think that if they get the correct answer, then everything will be fine. They kind of attach to the correct answer. They think that the correct answer will make them happy. Part of my duty is to show them that the joy does not come from getting the correct answer. It comes from the journey of trying to figure out what the answer is. The answer itself doesn't bring happiness. It's the struggle. It's thinking. It's trying possibilities. That's what brings the joy if you're trying to solve, let's say, a math problem. And it's my duty then, in this case, on my own relentless journey, to teach others. And part of what I teach them is to get rid of this desire, basically, right? That's part of what I need. I don't necessarily tell them get rid of the desire, but eventually kind of try to move them towards that direction of enjoying the process as opposed to being fixated on the outcome, to lose this strong desire for the outcome. All right. And then the next part says, it says he helps people lose everything they know, everything they desire, and creates confusion in those who think that they know. Yeah, actually, I'm going to stop here and then I'll do the next stanza of this verse and following verses in the next episode. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening to this podcast episode. Remember that this is really your podcast and I'm your servant. My goal in life, my mission in life is to help men die empty, to make sure that I present you with the ideas that you need in order to discover for yourself the mindset that you need to have in order to realize your true potential and die empty. Part of that is discovering who you are. Once you really know, truly know who you are, then you realize that you can pretty much achieve anything you set your mind to. And in particular, why is this important? Well, the world is filled with problems. We have problems. We have corrupt governments. We have people suffering of poverty. Right? We have people who are starving to death. We have all sorts of injustices. We have all sorts of needs. We have diseases plaguing people. We are facing a problem. Very soon we'll probably deplete our earth and overpopulation will probably kill us. So we need people who can take us to different planets. So far we have Musk taking us to Mars, but maybe that might not be enough. The population keeps growing. We probably need someone to take us to another planet, maybe take us to Jupiter or something. I don't know. I don't know about the atmosphere. I don't think so far we know that the atmosphere might not be conducive, but yes, we need people who can solve this problem for us, take us to a place that we've never been before. And I believe in you. I believe that you are capable of doing this. Once you realize who you truly are, once you learn the laws of how things work, once you're willing to dedicate your body, mind, and soul towards solving a problem that's facing humanity, I have no doubt in your capacity to solve that problem. And that's what gets me excited in the morning, realizing that if I do my part, if I present you with the necessary ideas, you can discover for yourself the correct mindset that will enable you to realize your true potential, to not only empower yourself, but push the human race forward. Now, if you have any obstacles that are stopping you from realizing your true potential, if something is hindering you from dying empty, please do let me know. Please send me an email. My email is in the episode description. Or if you have any comments or anything like that, I'd very much like to hear from you. That's really why I'm alive, is to do whatever I can to help you die empty and realize your true potential. Once again, thank you very much for listening and have a relentless week. Bye.